Good evening and welcome, everyone. I'm Allison Williams, representing the League of Women Voters of Bellingham and Whatcom County. Founded in 1920, the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization with 800 affiliates across the country. It encourages informed and active participation in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. The League never endorses candidates or political parties. Membership is open to men and women of all ages, and we invite you all to join us. This forum is recorded by Robert Clark and the Center for New Media and will be viewable on BTV, on the BTV YouTube channel, on our League website, and through our social media channels. Our media partners are the Linden Tribune and the Northern Light. We thank our partners for their generous support, and if you have the opportunity, we hope you will thank them as well. Before we get started, please make sure phones and digital devices are silenced and all computer notifications are turned off. Tonight, we host the candidates for Whatcom Superior Court Judge Position 2. There are 3 candidates on your ballot for this race. I'll introduce the candidates in alphabetical order. Please raise your hand when I call your name. Candidate James Erb, Evan Jones, and Lisa Keeler. Whatcom County Superior Court is one of 39 superior courts in Washington. Whatcom County has 4 Superior Court judges elected to 4-year terms and 3 court commissioners. Judges and commissioners hear and decide cases assigned to them by the presiding judge. The presiding judge supervises the judicial business of the Superior Court, acts as the spokesperson for the court, directs the court administrator in implementing administrative and general court policy, and performs judicial and administrative duties. The annual salary for a Superior Court judge is $199,675,000. We will follow specific rules for the forum. Candidates will have 1.5 minutes to respond to each question and will make a 1-minute closing statement. Michelle Kopcha will be tracking the time. Note the timer screen, which begins green as it counts down. It turns yellow when 15 seconds remain. And when it turns red, time is up, so please stop talking. We ask that candidates be respectful of the time allotted. If you speak beyond the time limit, your microphone will be muted. Questions have been prepared in advance by League members, and each candidate will be asked to respond to the same question. The order of the candidates has been determined in advance by the League organizers to ensure a random and fair sequence. There will be approximately 5 to 6 questions, and you have up to 1.5 minutes for your response. Please remember to unmute your microphone when I call your name for questions. So we're going to start with a 2-minute opening statement, and then we'll move to the first question. You'll have 1.5 minutes for each question, and then a 1-minute closing statement. For the opening statement, we are starting with candidate Keeler. So please remember to unmute your microphone and please give us your opening statement.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Lisa Keeler, and I am running for Whatcom County Superior Court Judge. Thank you for tuning in today to learn about why we're running. The reason I'm running is because I care about people. I want to be of service to our community, and I have the skills to manage the work in the courtroom as well as improve the legal system and access to justice. People are behind every case that becomes before the court, and I've had the pleasure of representing all of those types of people, whether they're business owners, homeowners, government officials working for municipalities, or just individuals struggling through some issue. And so I recognize all of those needs. I've also always been driven by service. That's my primary motivator as a person and as an attorney. And so I've spent much of my time in my practice serving on nonprofit boards, most especially law advocates here in Whatcom County, doing pro bono work and in engaging with my church and in my community. And I'd like to do that now as a judge. I also have developed skills in almost every type of case that comes before the Superior Court. I've managed cases both as a litigator for the government in private practice, but also as a pro tem commissioner and an arbitrator for Whatcom County Superior Court. I have the skills to do the work in the courtroom. I also have a proven ability to improve systems through strategic planning work, starting back with my law school career with Crime Stoppers back in Spokane, through recent work with law advocates, where I helped create and successfully execute a strategic plan. So not only do I have the ability to manage the heavy work in the courtroom, but I have the ability to do the work to improve the system. And that's what I'd like to do, and why I'd like your vote for Lisa Keeler for Whatcom County Superior Court Judge. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Erb, you'll be next for your opening statement. Please remember to unmute your microphone and go ahead.
Thank you very much. My name is James Erb, and I'm running for Whatcom County Superior Court Judge. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this candidates forum and for taking an interest in this important down ballot race. Our Superior Court judges make decisions every day in civil, family, and criminal cases that affect the lives of people right here in Whatcom County, the community that we all share. My wife and I relocated here back in 2007 to be closer to family. We absolutely love living here. Our children were born here, attend public schools, and we're actively engaged in our community, volunteering and serving on boards. On beautiful days like we've had the last few days, we like to get outside, go for family hikes or bike rides, or even just take our dog for a walk around the neighborhood. I am running for this position because I have the experience, qualifications, and the drive necessary to be our next Superior Court judge. I have over 15 years of professional legal experience working exclusively for the people, representing state, tribal, and local governments. I have outstanding criminal experience, and I've tried nearly 50 jury trials during the course of my career. My experience has earned me ratings of well qualified or qualified by 7 different local and state bar associations. I'm also proud to be supported and endorsed in this race by Supreme Court Justice Raquel Montoya Lewis, Whatcom County Executive Paul Sadhu, Ferndale Mayor Greg Hansen, and many other state, local elected officials, tribal leaders, and community members. If I'm elected to the bench, I promise to apply the law fairly and to the best of my ability, and to work with other stakeholders in our system to reduce inequities and to make the system more fair for everyone. I hope to earn your vote on August 4th during the primary, and again in November. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Candidate Jones, your opening statement, please remember to unmute.
Okay, thank you. I want to start by complimenting the organization, the League of Women Voters. It's so important, organizations like this and each of you, to engage the citizens in democracy, to encourage us to pursue change when necessary and to educate us about the candidates. So I want to start that way by complimenting each of you. Speaking the language of democracy like this group does is necessary and important, and I definitely recognize that. You've also invited all of us to speak, so that's some extra points there. So thank you. I'll introduce myself. My name's Evan Jones. I'm local. I grew up in the Columbia neighborhood of Bellingham. I attended local schools. I graduated from Western, and then I attended law school in Seattle. After law school, I came back home, and I've practiced my entire career as a lawyer here in our community, which has always been important to me. It's always been important to me to be here and be present and try to make a difference for the people that I care about, the people in this community. When I was in law school, this started when I was in law school. I worked for who is now Washington State Supreme Court Justice Cheryl Gordon McLeod, and I worked with her to draft, to represent folks that had been convicted of crimes and were incarcerated, and together we worked on drafting writs of habeas corpus and personal restraint petitions to address inequities in the system and to ensure that the most vulnerable folks' rights were being afforded them, and the process was the best that it could be. So that was important to me from law school before even coming back to this community to work. Since being here, I went to work for the city of Bellingham. I was in the city attorney's office, starting on the civil side and then moving over to criminal work in the municipal court. Again, there I was exposed to our community's most vulnerable. I worked as a municipal court prosecutor with folks that were experiencing poverty, experiencing homelessness in our community, and those experiences were important, and I've never forgotten them, have stayed with me. After leaving...
Our time is up. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to move on to our first question. And in the order that we have now, candidate Erb will be answering our first question first. So please, thanks for unmuting yourself. And our first question is, how do you distinguish yourself from your opponents?
Well, first I want to say that I'm friends with both of my opponents here, with Lisa and Evan. I consider them friends. We're both, all three of us have been practicing in this community for over 10 years and got to know each other socially and at events and different things like that. So I do know both of my opponents, and I think they're both fine people. I think that we each bring a little bit, something a little bit different to the table in terms of our experience coming in to this race. I'm the only candidate who has worked exclusively in the public service arena, representing the interests of the people. I think that's incredibly important. And I'm also coming to this race with independence. Unlike one of my opponents in this race, I have not been selected or endorsed by the county prosecutor or the county sheriff. Instead, I would assume the bench purely as an independent judge, not subject to any potential undue influence from those individuals, which is especially important for the position of a judge, where you want to make sure that whoever is sitting on the bench is able to judge the cases that are coming before him or her fairly and not be subject to that type of undue influence. So with respect to one of my opponents in this race, I think that the independence question is certainly something that our community should be asking itself, whether they're comfortable elevating someone who's worked in the prosecutor's office for the past 10 years to the bench, especially with the conversations we're having about systemic reform. Thank you.
All right. Candidate Jones, could you please answer the question, how do you distinguish yourself from your opponents?
Yes, thank you. So I echo what James said there. We're all socially familiar with one another and friends, and that's true. And I expect that to be true throughout the race and afterwards. So that's a good thing for all of us. I think that we're civil. You know, my experience, I think, is one that is able to distinguish myself from the candidates. I am the candidate who's working actively in Superior Court, trying cases, working before the current bench of judges every day. I just got home from work right before this, so I'm there doing the work for the people and of the people, and I've been doing that for some time. I've also worked in just about every court in our county. I spent time in the municipal courts, Bellingham, Linden Municipal Court. I worked as a pro tem judge in the Bellingham Municipal Court and in some of the small city courts as well. So I have judicial and criminal law experience in all those courts. And I think that's able to distinguish my breadth of experience and ability to understand the court. I also want to say that, you know, I'm endorsed by who I am because of my body of work and good work. I think I'm distinguished from the other candidates in that I'm the only candidate that has both prosecuted a police officer and has also filed a civil lawsuit against police officers. So the insinuation that I'm somehow hand selected, I think is inaccurate. I think I'm the only candidate that has done both of those things in my career, evidencing my independence and my ability to be separate. So,
thank you. Candidate Keeler, how would you distinguish yourself from your opponents?
Thank you. And I will reiterate as well, I've spent my entire career here working in Whatcom County and have worked both with James and know Evan socially and as colleagues. Other than being a woman, which is an obvious distinction, substantively, I have represented governments businesses, but most importantly, I've represented individuals for years. I've held the hand of clients when we're standing in front of the judge. I was in court not too long ago, maybe about a week ago, with a client who was desperate to have more contact with a family member, and we accomplished that. I've worked with clients who are desperate to figure out their water issues out in the county, and know how expensive and challenging and important it is to do the work of the Superior Court because of those individuals. And I've represented individuals who are facing criminal charges, though I'm not representing them as their criminal defensive attorney. I'm helping them out with all the other impacts that that criminal charge might have on their profession, their job, their life. So what distinguishes me is not only have I represented governments and the people like my opponents, but I've represented the actual people as their attorney and know what it means to be in front of the judge as individuals. Thank you.
All right, our next question, we're going to be starting out with candidate Jones. Can you tell us about a judge you admire and the reason for your choice?
That's a great question, and you know, I've thought about this, and who's the clear choice in my mind because of experiences I've had is Judge Garrett, the retiring judge whose position we seek. You know, when I was in civil practice, representing individuals and clients, I shared a wall with Judge Garrett as she was running for this position in 2012. I supported her as a part of her campaign, and I was happy to see her elected to that spot. And then I've been practicing in front of her for 8 years. And I sat down with her just the other day, and we talked about what it means to be a judge, and what I admire about her and what I hope to emulate if elected is her innate sense of justice seeking. You know, some judges in our court are interested in just getting out the other end of a case and moving on to the next. And that's a temptation, but Judge Garrett is not. Judge Garrett looks at each individual in the eye. She's compassionate, and she wants to find justice. If it exists in the case in front of her, the individuals in front of her, she wants to find that and end up there, no matter how long it takes. And that is incredibly admirable, and something I aspire to. And I told her that, and I mean it. And I will do my best, if elected, every day to remember that and to make that part of Judge Garrett a part of who I am as a judge.
Thank you. Candidate Keeler, can you tell us about a judge you admire and the reason why?
Yeah, I can think of two that were in Whatcom County that I had the pleasure of practicing in front of. It's retired Judge Charles Snyder and sadly now deceased Judge Ira Uhrig. And I think of them because they were such good friends and colleagues. And when you talk to them about their practice together, they talk about the camaraderie of being a judge, the challenges of being a judge, and finding joy in that. I most especially think of Judge Uhrig because of how committed he was to our community and to service. And both of those judges, in my experience in practicing in front of them, were always prepared. They cared about the cases. They put the time in. They treated everyone with respect and with dignity. And I think those are really the qualities you want in judges who take the time, to take the energy, and to put care into the work that they do. And so that's why I think of those two judges and how lucky we were to have them both practicing on the bench.
Right. And candidate Erb, can you tell us about a judge you admire and the reason for your choice?
Absolutely. One of the judges that I most admire is no longer a judge here in Whatcom County Superior Court because she was elected appointed by Governor Inslee to the Supreme Court of the state of Washington. And that's my friend, Justice Raquel Montoya Lewis. And I admire Justice Montoya Lewis for a whole host of reasons. I was fortunate enough to be able to travel down to Olympia with my family to the Temple of Justice for her investiture ceremony earlier this year. And I got to listen to her talk about what it means to be a judge and the qualities that she brings in terms of being intellectually curious, hardworking, always treating everybody who comes in front of her with dignity and respect, being an active listener in the courtroom and working just as hard outside of the courtroom. And one of the reasons why I respect Justice Montoya Lewis so much is because her job does not stop when she walks out of the courtroom and hangs up her robe. She is working day and night to try to improve our justice system to make it better for everyone, whether that is volunteering to teach, to reduce implicit bias in the system by practitioners in court, or teaching, or volunteering her time. She's always working to improve our system. And that's the type of model that I want to follow when I'm elected to the bench. Thank you.
We'll start with candidate Keeler for our third question. What impact do you believe a Superior Court judge has on the lives of citizens in Whatcom County?
So I believe there's a great impact. Of course, not every citizen in Whatcom County comes before a Superior Court judge, but many do. And the decisions of a Superior Court judge might have a broader impact long-term and over time. The reason why I say that is these are people's lives. Like I said earlier, I've represented these individuals who are trying to figure out what's going to happen with their home, trying to figure out what's going to happen with their, elderly parent who's being abused. And those day-to-day decisions have far and wide-reaching impacts on all of us, but most especially those individuals. I remember being on the bench as a pro tem commissioner one time on pro se uncontested dissolutions. So those are divorces where parties have already filled out the paperwork, everyone's agreed, you need to go to court just to sort of rubber stamp things, if you will. And usually it's very calm and straightforward. And so I wasn't anticipating too much issue on that calendar. And I was working on this one case, and this woman had handed up her paperwork. I put her under oath. I was kind of looking through the paperwork one last time, and she just began crying. And it was one of those moments where I set everything down. I focused just on her, because while this was sort of routine and run of the mill, it mattered so much. And I needed to attend to that person.
Candidate Erb, could you answer the question, what impact do you believe a Superior Court judge has on the lives of citizens in Whatcom County?
Well, as I said during my opening statement, I believe that our Superior Court judges have a tremendous impact on the lives of our friends and neighbors here in Whatcom County. Early in my career, I was prosecuting sexually motivated crimes against children. And I was representing child victims of those crimes, holding the hands of 3, 5, 7-year-old kids, talking with their parents who at some point were even older than I was about the case and about the job that I would be doing representing them. And those cases had a tremendous impact on the lives of not just those children, but those families. Later on, when I was representing the Nooksack Indian tribe, I worked with parents whose children had been removed from their homes by DSHS, trying to reunify those families and make sure that those children could stay connected to their tribes and to their culture. And again, those are the types of cases that come before Superior Court judges and have a tremendous impact, not just on the lives of those families, but on the lives of the entire tribal community. And Whatcom County, as you know, is home to 2 different Indian tribes. And finally, representing the interests of the city of Bellingham on a whole host of issues that affect people here in Whatcom County, whether that's land use issues, constitutional law issues, elections issues, or open government and transparency, which is also important, and that the people have a right to know what our government is doing. And so I think all those types of things in my experience prepare me well to serve on the bench and serve the people here in our community. Thank you.
Candidate Jones, what impact do you believe a Superior Court judge has on the lives of citizens in Whatcom?
Thank you. I agree with my opponents about the incredible importance of this position and the outward face to the community that the judge has the honor to be. This reminds me of a case, and I was in private practice for some time, and I represented individuals, and one of those individuals, and I think this is a good example to answer the question. One of those individuals, her name was Nanette, and she came to my office because she'd been involved in a traumatic event in her life, and she didn't know what to do. She lived in Burlington at the time. She'd been in the parking lot. Her car had been smashed into by another car in the parking lot that had two white men in the car. She was an African-American woman. And the police, she called the police for help, and they responded, and the police seemed to know the individuals that hit her. And there was, in her perception, laughing about what had happened, and they were sent on their way without any enforcement. And she didn't know what to do because it wasn't right what had happened to her. And that was an individual that I took, and together we filed a lawsuit. And her primary concern was that, well, what about the judge? Am I going to get a fair shake in the system? And to be able to assure someone that the judge is going to be fair, regardless of who the people involved in this were, and to give her a fair hearing was the most important thing to her. And I want to be that judge.
We're going to start with candidate Erb for the fourth question. The United States incarcerates a larger percentage of people of color than white people. Why do you think it's higher? And do you think a Superior Court judge has a role in addressing this issue?
That's a terrific question. And it's not just the United States of America. We see right here in our own home community of Whatcom County that we incarcerate more people than the statewide average, even though the rates of crime here in Whatcom County are lower than the statewide average. And so, this is an example of a system that is in desperate need of reform. And it is going to take Superior Court judges working with prosecutors, the defense bar, legislators, and governors who are all, to borrow a phrase from some of my friends, pulling the oar in the same direction to take us to where we want to go, where the system is a little bit more fair for everyone. So Judge Garrett, who's retiring from the bench at the end of this year and whose position is about to be filled, has been serving on the Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force for years. And if I'm elected to the bench, I'm going to volunteer to assume her role on the task force and work with the other stakeholders in our system locally and also statewide to address the problem of mass incarceration, to represent the interests of the Superior Court, and to push that issue forward as much as I can. Now, judges are not legislators. They're not governors or executives. They don't have budgetary authority. But they certainly have the wisdom and the skills to be able to be part of those conversations and to help us to improve a criminal justice system that for too many people is simply not just. Thank you.
Candidate Jones, would you answer the same question?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. It is an important issue and a primary problem that's front and center in our community. And I agree, in our community, I've seen it. And so the position of a judge in light of what's a clear problem is an important one. And I'll tell you, the judge needs to be in a position where parties can bring the issues to the court and not feel like the mind of the judge is already made up. So when these sorts of systemic issues are brought forward for discussion, the judge has to be one that can present as a neutral problem solver to listen to the issue and to help effectuate a situation. And it's necessary that the judge be the neutral problem solver. And so that, that's sometimes not as fun as being the advocate and being on the cutting edge of the issue, but it's a role that is so important in our society, because otherwise, if folks can't bring problems to the court for a neutral decision, then they don't bring the problems. And this is a problem. The disparate incarceration of minorities is a problem that needs to be brought. And so I would hope as a judge, I could be perceived as one that's neutral and willing to listen. And that, I think, will make a difference.
Thank you. Candidate Keeler, the same question.
Thank you. So I think the first part of the question is why, and the answer is primarily implicit bias, something that we're learning more and more about how this has bled into our entire infrastructure and most especially into our criminal justice system. But you see the same disparate impact in numbers in civil cases, in child abuse, neglect, dependency, removal cases. You see the same issues. And so I do agree that we need this team approach, the stakeholder approach, because judges only have one role to play in this bigger picture. One of the things that I think is actually really important for the bench is assessment, not just self-assessment about implicit bias, but actual auditing and data about what's going on, and not just how the whole system is operating, but how the bench itself is using its discretion. Because at every stage where you have discretion, and also where you don't, there are systems that need to be addressed and rewritten and reevaluated. A number of years ago, I was invited to be a fellow of the American Bar Foundation, which does conduct actual data-driven research into law, into what's going on in our communities, and what we can do to try to improve that. And so I hope to bring more of that to the bench, but also my own experience of knowing what it's like to be treated differently because of what I look like in front of a particular judicial officer. I've experienced that myself. Thank you.
Thank you. So this will be our last question for the evening before we move on to closing statements. And we'll start with candidate Jones for this last question. Do you think alternative sentencing is effective and something that should be expanded on? And are there additional opportunities for alternative sentencing in Whatcom County?
Yes, definitely. I have experience with working with our county's therapeutic courts, direct experience, and I've seen incredible successes and real meaningful differences that are made to individuals, but also to the community. So I've worked when I was in juvenile. Part of my experience was coming up through the local court system in district court and then in juvenile court. And now in Superior Court. In juvenile court, I was involved entirely with the juvenile drug court, and that was incredibly meaningful to be able to work with young kids who come from situations where they're expected to be in trouble and they're expected to act in ways that that we call criminal, and to be able to work with them in a therapeutic way and to encourage success at that early age was very meaningful. So I would hope that programs like that work can be expanded on and emphasized. And I would do that because I've had those experiences to understand that they work. And so I would encourage that as a judge. Also as a prosecutor, over my career, I've done an incredible amount of working with our county mental health courts, also agreements to encourage treatment and rehabilitation prior to any sort of conviction in the case. And I've seen successes in all that. It has to be done right. It has to be done with personal accountability. But I think we can do that, and I would work on that.
Thank you. Candidate Keeler, the final question.
Yes, thank you. I mean, I generally agree with what candidate Jones said. Yes, we need alternative sentencing. Yes, we should expand it. We should look for programming and options wherever we can. I think we want to be innovative. I think we want to be open and try things within, of course, within reason, and wanting to find programming sometimes that has worked elsewhere. Some of the programs that have been really successful have started in small places around the country, and then they get exported. And so I think it's, again, really important to be connected with things like the American Bar Foundation, the American Bar Association, and seeing what else is working somewhere to see if it's something we can do here. And not just alternative sentencing, but really from the very get-go. And I'm talking about like pre-trial release, and creating as many options and alternatives we can that don't just tie having money to staying out of jail. And so we definitely need to invest time, energy, money, and especially judicial attention to alternative sentencing and partnering with stakeholders in that, but also pre-trial work to try to avoid keeping people incarcerated if we don't need to. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Erb, the last question. Do you need me to repeat it?
No, thank you very
Okay.
much. So I've been talking for the last few years about the need in Whatcom County for us to expand access to our therapeutic courts. And I'm talking about both the drug court and the mental health court. We talked a moment ago, last question, about disparities in our justice system and mass incarceration and the over-inclusion of people of color in our local justice system. Well, in terms of data, that then flips again the other way when you talk about who's given access to our therapeutic courts. So we need to look at that and figure out why that is, ask those hard questions, and make some changes so that we can make sure that those therapeutic courts are serving the broadest possible range of community members who can actually benefit from that type of a model, rather than just cycling in and out of the criminal justice system and getting punishment over and over again, rather than the treatment that they need to get well. So I think this is just one of the tools in the toolbox that we will need to use in order to safely reduce the rates of incarceration in our community and make sure that people are being treated for those health problems that they have, whether that's mental illness or substance abuse, that they're being treated as if they do have a health problem rather than as if they're criminals. And that is definitely something that I support. Thank you for the question.
So we'll move on to our final closing statements. For each of you, you have 1 minute, and we're starting with candidate Erb.
Well, I want to thank the League again for hosting the candidates this evening for this important candidate forum and giving the voters of Whatcom County the opportunity to see us and see how we think about some of these important issues. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about my experience and qualifications for the job. And again, I want to reiterate, because it came up during several questions, this idea of judicial independence, I think, is critically important. I think that when community members walk into the courtroom, they should have confidence that the person who is sitting on the bench is there to judge the case in front of them fairly. Have people walking into the courtroom questioning whether or not the judge has already made up his or her mind when they sit down in their courtroom to have their case heard. I think that is absolutely important. And as a judge with true independence, I offer that to our community. I am passionate about the things that encouraged me to run for office the first time in 2018, and that is driving me to run for this important office again, because there is a lot of injustice in our criminal justice system. There's a lot of injustice built into our justice system overall, and we need people in positions throughout the system that want to work to eliminate some of that injustice.
Thank you. Our time's up. Now, because we've changed the view a bit, the timer may not be visible to everyone. You may need to click the arrow across the top if you need to see the timer screen. So, Candidate Jones, your closing statement, please.
Okay, and thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to the membership and the community. I wish we could be there in person. I hope what I've been able to convey tonight is a genuine concern and care for the community, and that means all members of the community. Through my work, through representing defendants, which I've done, through prosecuting criminal cases and working on treatment-based solutions and problem solving, through my work as a pro tem judicial officer in Bellingham Municipal Court, in the small city courts, my relationships throughout the community, relationships I built from having a lifetime here. I hope that I've portrayed how important that is to being a judge for all the people. And that's what I hope to be. I agree the judge needs to be entirely independent, and that includes independent on partisan issues. Folks from all walks of life come before the court, and they need to see a judge that is compassionate and cares about everyone in the community, not just who they might agree with. And I'm prepared to be that judge.
Thank you. Our time is up. Candidate Keeler, your closing statement, please.
Thank you. And thank you again to the League and everyone else who put on this forum. It's so important to educate voters and have us have an opportunity to connect. I have a personal commitment that I keep in mind in all things I do in life, which is a commitment to excellence and the fair treatment of all. I have a friend who identified another essentially motto that I have as a person, which is Lisa Keeler gets things done. I'm known as a person of action. I have a proven ability to make systemic change towards specifically access to justice, specifically with my recent work with law advocates on the board there and working through that strategic plan, but also elsewhere. In response to a call from our Supreme Court recently to take action to improve our systems to fight against racism and bias, I made a pledge along with a number of other attorneys in our community, and I've already had conversations with them about what we can do to improve it, and I intend to make good on that pledge, which is why I'm asking everyone to vote for me, Lisa Keeler, for Whatcom County Superior Court Judge. Thank you.
On behalf of the League of Women Voters, we thank all the candidates for being here tonight, and thank you also for running for public office.